Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today we're talking about Brevo. Here's a question worth sitting with. What happens when a company spends over a decade building brand recognition around a name, and then just walks away from it? In 2023, a European software company did exactly that. Blue, a marketing platform used by hundreds of thousands of businesses, quietly retired its own name. It became Brevo. From the outside, this looked like vanity, a fresh coat of paint, the kind of rebrand consultants love and customers barely notice. But that red misses what was actually happening. This wasn't cosmetic. It was overdue. The name Blue had been telling a story about email. The product, meanwhile, had quietly become something much bigger. A full customer relationship platform spanning SMS, chat, automation, and more. The rebrand wasn't reinventing the company. It was catching the marketing up to reality. And by the time that name change happened, Brevo had already crossed $100 million in annual recurring revenue. It had earned so-called centaur status. And it had done something rarer still. It got there profitably, serving more than 500,000 customers, from single-location shops to major international brands. This is not a Silicon Valley story of blitzscaling and burn rate. It's a story about discipline. About a company that treated marketing not as a department bolted onto the side of the business, but as the very force that shaped what the product had to become. Let's start at the beginning. Built in the European crucible. When Blue launched in 2012, marketing automation was not an empty field. Established players had already staked out the high end of the market. Powerful platforms built nearly a decade earlier aimed at sophisticated marketing teams. But that power came at a cost. Steep learning curves, dense cluttered interfaces, pricing that quietly excluded an enormous segment of the market. The small and medium-sized business that didn't have a marketing operations team, didn't have time to learn conditional logic, and just wanted their email to go out and work. Founder Armand Tiberge saw that gap and built for it directly. Not powerful, not enterprise grade, just simple. Something closer to set it and forget it than to enterprise software. And the company's structure reflected that ambition from day one. Engineering was based in India, which kept the company capital efficient, but the product itself went to market in Europe. That geographic choice turned out to matter enormously, and not for the reasons you'd expect. Europe is not one market. It's dozens of languages, dozens of cultural contexts, and a patchwork of some of the strictest privacy regulations in the world. Building a product that could survive that environment from day one was hard. But it was the kind of hard that pays dividends later. Think of it like training at altitude. The friction Brevo absorbed early, localization, compliance, fragmentation, became muscle. By the time the company was ready to scale globally, its architecture wasn't something that needed to be retrofitted for compliance or translated after the fact. It was already built that way. Structural constraints, faced early, had become a competitive advantage. The marketing engine that shaped the product. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because in Brevo's early years, marketing and product weren't really two departments having two conversations. They were having the same conversation. Growth ran almost entirely on inbound self-serve acquisition. There was no outbound sales force knocking on doors. Customers found Brevo through search, through carefully managed paid campaigns, and through a freemium tier designed to remove any excuse not to try it. And that acquisition model placed a very specific demand on the product. If a customer has to discover your tool, sign up, and launch their first campaign without ever talking to a human being, your software cannot have friction. Not a little. None. Because in a self-serve funnel, every extra click is a customer walking away. So the marketing team obsessed over efficiency, not as a talking point, but as an operating discipline. They tracked not just the average cost of acquiring a customer, but the cost of acquiring the next customer, and the one after that, across every digital channel. That rigor is part of how Brevo built a meaningful share of its North American revenue without ever leaning on a traditional sales team. For a long stretch, marketing wasn't supporting the product. Marketing was the distribution channel, and that meant the product had one job: be an excellent self-serve conversion engine, or the whole growth model collapses. From volume to bespoke marketing. But markets shift. And around the rise of generative AI, something changed in the environment Brevo was operating in. Suddenly, Anyone could produce marketing content at massive scale. Inboxes predictably filled up. And Brevo's own data revealed an uncomfortable truth. The old strategy of just sending more email, the batch and blast approach, was reaching its limit. The pattern was consistent and clear. As companies sent more email, engagement didn't rise with it. It fell. Open rates, which typically hover around a fifth of recipients, slipped further for the highest volume senders. Click-throughs weakened. And a lot of recipients didn't even bother unsubscribing, they just went quiet. Silent disengagement. This is where a marketing insight didn't just inform a product decision, it drove one. Brevo's growth leaders reached a conclusion that ran against decades of email marketing instinct. Giving customers the ability to send even more email was no longer a strategy worth investing in. The scarce resource wasn't inbox space, it was attention. And attention isn't won through volume, it's won through relevance. So Brevo reframed its entire philosophy around what it calls bespoke marketing, reaching the right person at the right moment on the channel they actually want to hear from you on. But you can't deliver bespoke messaging through an email tool alone, so the product had to grow up. Brevo expanded into SMS, WhatsApp, web and mobile push notifications, live chat, and a built-in CRM for managing sales pipelines. The strategic shift here is worth naming precisely. Brevo stopped offering customers a megaphone. It started offering them an orchestration layer. Serving two masters. Of course, becoming a full omnichannel CRM platform creates a genuine tension. How do you build the kind of sophisticated, multi-step automation that enterprise customers demand, without scaring away the small business owner who chose you in the first place because you were the simple option? Brevo's answer has a name: progressive disclosure. Picture two different users. A local bakery owner logs in to send a holiday newsletter. Their experience looks almost exactly like it did in 2012. Clean, minimal, fast. Meanwhile, an experienced marketing team at a larger company logs into the very same product, and just beneath the surface, they find complex automation logic, conditional routing, and deep CRM integration. Same product. Two completely different depths of experience, depending on what the user needs. That design elasticity is what let Brevo run two go-to-market motions at once: an efficient, low-touch funnel for small businesses and a more hands-on, relationship-driven motion for larger accounts, without forking the product into two separate tools. AI as a foundation, not a feature. As Brevo scaled toward roughly 1,000 employees and pushed further into the mid-market, a new bottleneck appeared: data complexity. Information was scattered across silos, both inside the company and on the customer side, and that fragmentation was quietly undermining the very bespoke, personalized marketing that Brevo was promising its customers. The company's response was a bet that AI needed to be foundational to the product, not decorative. Not a feature for auto-generating a catchy subject line, a structural layer underneath everything. That bet shows up most clearly in Aura, an in-product assistant that responds to plain language requests. A marketer can simply ask it to find everyone who opened a specific email in the last week, and Aura will assemble that group into a new segment, ready to be used for, say, a WhatsApp campaign. Layer in custom data fields for enterprise clients, and Brevo had turned analytics from a backward-looking report into a forward-looking growth engine, one that encourages deeper usage, smoother upgrades, and ultimately more revenue retained inside the platform. What this story teaches. So what do we take from Brevo's climb to centaur status? First, marketing strategy should set the bar for product friction. If your growth engine depends on self-serve, search-driven acquisition, your product doesn't have the luxury of complexity. Time to value has to be almost instant. Second, volume is a liability, relevance is an asset. In a saturated attention economy, giving customers the ability to produce more output isn't a feature, it's a trap. The smarter roadmap favors segmentation and orchestration over raw send volume. Third, progressive disclosure is how you move up market without abandoning home. You don't need two products to serve a beginner and a power user. You need one product that knows how to hide its own complexity until it's needed. And fourth, structural constraints can become a moat. The regulatory complexity of launching in Europe wasn't just an obstacle for Brevo to survive. It became architecture that later competitors would struggle to replicate. Brevo didn't reach the scale it did by building a marginally better email tool. It got there by treating marketing and product as one system, not two departments. When self-serve growth was the priority, it built for radical simplicity. When inboxes filled up and attention got scarce, it rebuilt itself around relevance. The lesson underneath all of it is simple to say and hard to execute. Don't design your product in a vacuum. Let the economics of how you acquire customers, the way customer behavior shifts, and the demands of your distribution engine tell you what to build next. The most resilient software companies aren't the ones with the most features. They're the ones still willing to adapt to how they actually have to be sold. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.